Chapter 484. Grand Wedding 1-inch. How does this even make sense? I looked around and saw people staring at me with raised brows. Some even looked at me with gloating looks. In particular, Yuke, what are you laughing at? You. I pursed my lips, feeling the wrinkles on the mask change subtly. Indeed, my mask was that of an old man. With graying white hair, deep wrinkles, and sunken cheeks. I wasn't just old. I was really old. Ah, shit. Looking around me and seeing everyone's faces, I felt like crying. Why was I the only one made to look like an old man? You have to change your voice too. Make yourself sound older. I'll kill you. Oh no. Leon covered his face with both hands and pretended to look scared. The only issue with his actions was the lack of change in his expression. His face just seemed to drip with sarcasm at this very moment. I'll kill you. You already said that. I wanted to make sure you understood. Has everyone put on their disguise? If you have, please line up here. We will soon send you to the kasha. With a small portal appearing behind the head maid, she looked at us with a thin smile on her face. Despite her stern voice, she was rather friendly. I looked at Leon and shook my head. He's not worth it. From there, I decided to line up, but my troubles didn't stop. A hand soon pressed against my shoulder, pulling me back. Oi, oldie, the fuck are you doing here? Her appearance was different, but the tone and voice were recognizable. I know we kind of look like staff, but we are actually here on an important task. If you would, wait, Kira. A hand pressed against Kira's shoulder, stopping her. When she turned around, she frowned. What do you want? That. Stifling a laugh, Aoife pointed to me. Kook. That. He's also with us. Kira flicked her head and dubiously looked at me. Are you shitting me? No, look at his posture. Considering his looks, he should be more hunched. Oh, shit. Kira's eyes widened in realization. Pulling her hand back, she wiped it using Aoife's sleeve, prompting an, "Oi, watch it." From her. Unbothered by Aoife, Kira leaned in closer to look at me. PFTT, a laugh escaped her lips shortly after that. No fucking way. Ha ha ha. Pointing at me, she slapped her thigh. Poor soul. I don't know who you are, but it's Julian. What did you just say? That. The old man is Julian. Aoife repeated, staring at me with inflated cheeks. Blinking her eyes, Kira's eyes started to water and her shoulders started to shake. Taken aback by her reaction, Aoife cocked her head and pulled her back to get a look at her, but soon enough, Kira exploded. Boo-ha-ha-ha. Her laugh attracted the attention of all those present. Boo-ha-ha-ha. We. Through deep breaths, she would point at me while laughing as tears flowed out of her eyes. I just stared at the scene in silence while Leon stood behind Kira, mimicking her actions without making any noise. That. Who help? Ha-ha, can't breathe, Hugh. I was unsure of which one to be pissed about. Leon or Kira, who help? After a certain point, Kira's face started to turn purple from how hard she was laughing. Ha-ha, Hugh, she looked to be in between bouts of pain and joy. And, it may or may not be due to me. Are you okay? Bueahe. Kira's eyes turned bloodshot as she burst out laughing again. It was likely due to a combination of my voice and my powers. Still, hidden within the laughter I could see a certain horror. Hugh, make it stop. I looked up at Aoife, who flinched at the sight of me. She shook her head, her face growing pale. No, that's cheating. I innocently blinked. What do you mean by that? Aoife hastily covered her mouth. With an, oh shit, she looked up at me. And dashed away. I was about to follow up when I realized there was a far more valuable target. Flinching visibly, Leon shook his head. Spare me. His eyes paused on the suffocating Kira and his face paled. That's too much. You monster. Ha. Gripping my ankle, Kira looked up at me with a begging look. She looked pitiful, but I held no pity for her. I was just about to open my mouth when a powerful voice bellowed throughout the reception. Cadets. Looking back, the head maid was looking at us with a sharp expression. It was only then that I noticed that everyone was looking at us. Cease your behavior right now. You will all soon be sent to a very dangerous place and such behavior will be unacceptable. Please stop at this moment and take my final words seriously. Looking at Kira, I silently clicked my tongue. Hoo-ah. That was when she finally stopped laughing and started panting heavily. Fuck, I thought I saw my life flash before my eyes. Ignoring her mumbles, I looked back at the head maid, who alternated her gaze between us before nodding. I hope this type of behavior doesn't continue beyond this portal. It would be okay if your actions only influence yourself, but you will not be going by yourself. You are all a group. One's mistake can lead to the entire group being implicated. Not only that, but the House of Myron might also be implicated. Your actions don't just affect you. There was no arguing with her points. I understood where she was coming from, and so I just merely nodded my head in understanding. That seemed to do it, as she finally smiled again and continued her pep talk. From what we had to look out for to who we had to be careful of, she mentioned everything that we needed to know. By the time she was done, an hour had passed and it was time for us to finally enter the portal. If everyone is ready, then please go into the portal. I wish you all the best of luck. Womb. First to enter the portal was Amael, who was followed shortly after by Aoife and then the rest of the class. Following them closely from behind, I made sure to remember all the faces of those around me. Even though we had some sort of device that would tell us when someone was near, it was still safe to memorize the faces of all those around me. I spent the better part of the next minute doing that. Soon, it became my turn, and without hesitation, I entered the portal. Best of luck. I wish you a safe trip. The head maid's words were the last words I heard before my vision turned black. The Kasha, the land beyond the walls. And the forgotten land, it's the same. A gray, desolate sky stretched endlessly over the land, draping every inch in a lifeless monochrome and stripping away even the faintest hint of color, leaving behind a world devoid of vitality. The sky was the perfect reflection of the gloom that covered the world. None of the people within had ever seen the true sky, assuming the gray and monochrome sky as the norm. Like caged beasts who knew nothing about the true freedom that was beyond. But a few knew of the true sky that lay beyond the gray. Ha! A wrinkly hand reached out for the gray sky, its tips almost touching it. He could almost feel it at its fingertips, but couldn't quite touch it. So close. To those who knew, their only thought was, I want to rip the sky. Rip the bars of the cage that trap them. The pungent smell of alcohol hit my nostrils the moment I regained my vision. I wasn't the only one to notice the smell, as the others showed similar expressions. What is this smell? Ook. My nose. It was quite powerful. Where are we? As I glanced around, it became clear we were in a vast hall flanked by towering pillars on either side. The dark marble floor beneath me gleamed with such a polished sheen that I could see my own reflection staring back at me. Torches hung by the side of the pillars, casting a dim glow over the surroundings. The more I looked around the place, the more gloomy it felt. Did we make it to the right place? Just as I was wondering, the muffled sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. When I turned around, a group of people headed in our direction. Leading the group was a tall, middle-aged man with striking sharp features and a sturdy build. His deep green eyes seemed to pierce through the dim light of the hall, while his dark hair swayed gently with each step he took. Welcome, friends from afar. With open arms and a smile, he welcomed all of us. His voice transmitted through every corner of the large hall as he spoke. It is rare for us to have such guests, and I'm pleased to see that all of you have made it here safely. Despite his welcoming appearance and smile, I couldn't help but frown upon seeing the man before me. His power, it was well hidden, but I could feel it. He's strong, very strong, perhaps not as strong as Delilah, or Atlas, but he definitely was at around the 7th tier or higher. They weren't lying when they said the people of the Kosh are very strong. It is unfortunate that I can't spend much time with you guys, but there's something that I have to take care of urgently. In the meantime, I'm sure you have all been briefed about our situation. Glancing at the group of people behind him, they all stepped forward and displayed a few brooms and buckets. In order to avoid suspicion from the House of Astrid, we had no choice but to have you all come as servants. While the sudden influx of servants may seem suspicious, I can handle that part. In the meantime, I reached out for a broom and thanked the man in front of me before glancing at it. It's just a regular broom. I don't have many rules, but of the few, I would like it if none of you acted out of place when you go out. If someone asks you for money, you ignore them. If someone is dying, you ignore it. If a child wants some food, you ignore them. Before anyone had the chance to say anything, the man's tone lowered, reaching an almost threatening level. I don't mean it just for your safety, but for our safety too. The atmosphere instantly became heavy. The House of Astrid has strict control over the Eastern Kasha. They've recently shut down all their doors, and despite our attempts at trying to communicate with them, we were unable to do a thing. It was also then that everything started. Pursing his lips, the man shook his head while mumbling, "At the rate things are going, we might have no choice but to take drastic measures. I hope that won't be the case." Raising his head, he took a deep breath and looked around. Eventually, his gaze settled over to me. Confused, I furrowed my brows. But before I could dwell on it, he began walking toward me, his steps slow and steady, until he finally stopped right in front of me. My entire body tensed at the sight of me, and the moment he stopped in front of me, his hand my breath caught. Slowly, I lifted my head to meet his sharp gaze, and that was when he extended way. "You must be the professor in charge of them. I'm sorry I couldn't welcome you all properly, but I hope you understand. I will be leaving now, but I'll call you back when I have time. I hope that is all right with you." It all grew silent from that point as I found myself unable to speak. Did he just? Breaking the silence was a low, yet audible stifled sound. PFTT. Chapter 485. Grand Wedding. 2. Arden Myron, the current head of the Myron household, strode down the long, narrow corridor of his estate, his footsteps echoing, accompanied by a steady rhythm of others trailing behind him. His gaze lingered on the dimly lit corridors, where the flickering candles and torches cast a dim glow around. His expression fell as he noticed the faint cracks spreading across the walls of the estate. Just how far have we fallen? It wasn't long ago when the estate was thriving. The walls were impeccably maintained and polished, and the corridors were brightly lit, rendering candles and torches unnecessary. Not only that, but looking out the window, Arden closed his eyes. And most importantly, the people weren't suffering so much. How could everything fall to this extent? How could? Arden took a deep breath and opened his eyes. He knew very well the reason why everything had turned out like this. It was due to none other than the House of Astrid. They were the cause of it all, the collapse in trade, and the complete withdrawal of their forces from Eastern Kasha. Without their powers, the monsters flooded into the cities, leaving many with no choice but to flee or face death. The responsibility of protecting the main city Rona in the Eastern Kasha fell to the major households. They did their best, and at first, they managed to fend off the attacks. However, the entire ordeal proved to be costly. Resources needed to be used in order to heal the troops, but this was the Kasha. There was only so much they could provide. In the end, with the lack of resources, the troops were forced to retreat. While they hadn't collapsed just yet, they were on the verge of collapse. It was for this reason that Arden could only greet the guests for a brief moment. He had to quickly get out to help the troops fend off the monsters. Or at least, that used to be the case. That was until the House of Astrid changed. The House of Astrid had never been one to command over the others. They were arrogant, but they never crossed the line. At least, until recently. Overnight, everyone suddenly changed. The change was significant, and it was what created the entire chaos within the Eastern Kasha. Family head. As Arden rounded a corner, he heard the voice of one of his vassals. Yes, it was his right-hand man, Lauren Myron, his second cousin. Standing a few feet shorter and with a rather bulky build, Lauren had to raise his head in order to look at the family head. "About the guests, why did you act the way that you did? Are you talking about the part where I mistook one of the cadets for a professor?" Yes. Lauren nodded. This had indeed been troubling him for quite a bit. He was confused about why the family head would make such a mistake. Realizing the other vassals were similarly confused, Arden smiled. That was on purpose. While the disguises were quite well crafted, making it hard for him to see through them, he could tell who was who through their general power. After reaching a certain level, one could make a general assessment of someone's strength from the mana that flowed out of their body. There were a few that stood out immediately to Arden, but in particular, one stood out to him the most. Not because of his power, but because of something else. His mana, pure. It was some of the purest he had ever seen. I approached him after getting curious about him. I just wanted to get a better look at this cadet. He intrigued me quite a bit when I looked at him. He was a rare talent. Not just him, but the others too. Compared to the talents of those in the House Astrid, I wonder who's better. He only got a small feel through the handshake, but that was still not enough for him to tell. "What did you feel from the cadet?" What did I feel? Arden thought for a moment before shaking his head. Barely anything. Staring at his own hand, Arden shook his head. I felt. Barely anything. What? Shifting his focus away from his hand, he shrugged his shoulders. There are times when I can be wrong, and those times are usually rare. However, there have been a few times when I have been wrong. What was talent? In Arden's eyes, it was the rate at which one absorbed mana. But was that really the case? In Julian's case, his rate of absorption seemed abysmal. And yet, he stood out amongst his peers. Surely there was no way he was untalented. How could someone untalented be so strong? That was why Arden believed he was wrong. Because there was no way someone so untalented could be so strong. Well, that is unless he is desperate enough to push his body to the limit. Perhaps then, chuckling, Arden shook his head. I was merely curious. Whether I'm wrong or right we'll figure out soon enough. For now, we have more important matters to attend. Taking a step forward, his smile faded and his expression hardened. Single quote. I hope everything flows smoothly. We can't afford a single hiccup. A crimson veil draped over the somber gray sky, casting a faint shadow on the land beneath. Piercing through the red haze was a towering black pillar, its jagged form stretching upwards before splintering into countless branches. Rustle tilde beneath the looming tree stood a tall woman with long brown hair and piercing deep brown eyes. Clad in a sharp red blazer and matching pants, her striking presence clashed starkly with the desolate, lifeless surroundings. As her hair fluttered, she looked up at the sky. What a suffocating sky. It was vastly different from the blue sky of the Empire. It was almost disgusting. She reached her hand forward, and the tree bent toward her, its leaves softly brushing against her fingertips as if in recognition. A subtle smile played on her lips as she withdrew her hand, her eyes scanning her surroundings with a quiet, yet terrifying intensity. Hierarch, weak. Surrounding her from all sides were monsters of all sorts of proportions, their hollow eyes and expression focused on the distant city of Rona, the capital of the Eastern Kasha. In particular, her eyes fell on the enormous golden palace in the distance. Soon, she mumbled. Soon, withdrawing her gaze, she reached for her breast pocket and retrieved a photo. In there, her smile grew. How many years has it been? She mumbled to herself, focusing on the tall figure within the picture. Thinking of him, her smile grew cold. Quote. How are the children? Are they no? What a stupid question. Her hand clenched tightly as the photo crumbled under her grasp. If it's you, I'm sure they're living in hell. After all, you'd do anything to get back at me. Swoosh. Setting the image ablaze, a faint purple circle appeared on her right forearm. Nocturne Order, High Seat, Serafina Dorne Evanis. Ook, Kekakik, PFTT, Julian gripped his broom tightly and began sweeping with uneven and forced strokes. Should I just use emotive magic again? What if I just make them laugh at my own jokes? No, that wouldn't work since they'd laugh without using my powers anyway. Leon walked up next to Julian and refilled the water in the bucket. At the same time, he respectfully lowered his head. Professor, I've just replaced the water. Kira, who was standing not far from Leon, walked over with a frown. She looked annoyed. Is she coming to help me? Julian thought, his brows relaxing faintly. Oi, you're speaking too loud. Keep your noise level to a bearable amount. She went on to point at Julian. That's disrespectful to the professor. Oh, I see Hugh. Julian raised his broom and swung it at them. Swoosh, swoosh. They both easily avoided his attacks while laughing together. Kakaka, kokoko. Kokoko. Sighing to himself, Julian raised his head and looked up at the ceiling of the long corridor. Why do I have to deal with such children? What did I do to deserve this? You guys are so immature. There was at least one person with some sense. Wiping one of the windows, Evelyn shook her head while looking in our direction. We're supposed to be servants. We can't mess around unless you want our identities to be exposed. You're right. Ah, shit. When both Kira and Leon settled down, Evelyn nodded her head and looked at Julian. Don't take them too seriously. Leon is usually mature, but when she's around Kira he tends to become immature himself. You can't really blame him. He's still a teen, Professor Pua. Halfway through her sentence, Evelyn covered her mouth and burst out laughing. Even you. Ah, sorry, it just slipped. I didn't mean to. Hoo-ha-ha-ha. Holding onto her stomach, Evelyn started to hunch over. She started to feel pain. Julian's mind went into a dark place at that moment. He started to think of all sorts of ways to hurt them. Eventually, however, he was able to settle down. Lowering his head, Julian decided to ignore all the outside noise. At some point, he was able to do so. Even when Kira, Leon, Evelyn, and the others were messing in the background, Julian looked completely and utterly disinterested as he moved to one of the nearby windows and started to wipe the glass. As he started to wipe, Julian caught sight of his own reflection. The cloth in his hand scrunched up as he tightened his grip over it. How am I the only one like this? There must be some conspiracy behind this. Could it be that Leon found out about his real identity? No, Julian shook his head. He was sure Leon would do worse if he really did know about his identity. There was certainly something else at play in this situation. But who? Delilah. No, why would she? It can't be that she know, that's ridiculous. Julian quickly shook his head and stopped dwelling over it. Settling his gaze towards the outside world, his expression changed subtly. How could he describe the world outside? Grim, desolate, colorless. The cobblestone streets were mostly empty, and those that did appear were all in rags. Their faces were sunken, and their bodies were extremely frail. One could easily tell that they hadn't eaten in a long time from their conditions. Just how bad is the situation over here for it to reach such extreme? The outside was completely different from the mansion that they were in. The mansion alone stood taller than most of the buildings outside, with it being one of the only few buildings that provided a source of light. This created a striking contrast against the somber gray sky, with the red sun casting a dim, filtered light over the small buildings below. But even then, it was still nothing compared to the massive palace that stood at the far end of the city. It was so grand and bright that it was even visible from where Julian was. The building stood out with its towering white pillars, a semi-domed roof gleaming in gold, and lights cascading around it. It exuded an air of unmistakable luxury. Although Julian didn't know the details, based on everything he'd heard, he could make an educated guess about who the palace belonged to. That must be where the House of Astrid is located. The most powerful and intimidating power within the Easter Kasha. Wu Tilda, whistling under his breath, a figure appeared before Julian. Have a look at the palace. Do you notice anything strange about it? Anything strange? Almighty looked in the direction of the palace and shortly after shook his head. No, nothing. I might be able to if I can get closer. Okay. Clank. Julian opened the window, wincing as the dry, arid air from the outside world hit him. Almighty hopped off Julian's hand and flew out from the window as Julian hastily closed it back. Or tried to. Right as he was about to close the window, he stopped. Looking down towards the streets, his expression changed abruptly. What the? His face fell the moment he spotted the familiar figure. Standing in front of a group of children, he held a tray filled with food. Julian's face fell almost immediately. This might be mad. Less than an hour into their expedition, one of their group had already broken one of the rules of the place. Chapter 486. Grand Wedding 3. What's it like to truly be hungry? Growl. Like an aching emptiness. Food, in need food. Or more like a knife to the gut. Help, I beg you. My sister. No, it was more than that. The pain wasn't confined to the stomach, it seeped into the mind, clouding thoughts and sapping clarity away from one's brain. Each passing moment felt heavier as if the mind couldn't take it any longer. Fat would start to be used as an energy source. But what if one didn't have any fat storage? What would become of them? They'd become skin and bones. Please, help me. Kaelian was all too familiar with the pain, the hunger, and the helplessness that came from poverty. For just one cookie, he managed to slaughter his way out of the cave. He could still vividly remember the pain and desperation that he had once felt in the times when he was with his mother. That was why even despite his best attempts at ignoring the situation, he couldn't help but feed the children. Line up quietly, there's plenty of food for everyone. Holding onto a large bucket of bread, he quietly handed each child a piece. Me, I want some. I want. Despite Kaelian's best attempt at trying to get the children to line up, the hunger made it impossible for them to listen to his words. The moment they saw food, they all rushed his way. It was only when another figure appeared that the children stopped. Line up properly. Perhaps it was because of his demeanor, or perhaps it was because of his eyes that seemed to lack emotions. The children settled down quickly as Keys turned his head to look at Kaelian. What are you doing? Feeding the children, can't you see? Kaelian handed a piece of bread to another child who hurriedly shoved it under his clothes and dashed away. Quietly staring at the scene, Keys frowned. Noticing the change in Keys's features, Kaelian smiled while handing another piece of bread out. It is expensive to be poor. When one can hardly worry about oneself, one does not have the capacity to be grateful. Keys nodded, pretending to understand. However, he didn't understand at all. As someone who was born rich, his experiences were far different from Kaelian's. He hardly understood where Kaelian was coming from, and in his eyes, all of this seemed stupid. They had clearly been told they couldn't do this, and yet, Kalian went ahead and ignored one of the few rules they had set up for them. Even so, Keys didn't report Kalian. Staring at the children, he felt nothing. Their skinny frames, sunken cheeks, hollow eyes, and trembling bodies left him unmoved. If anything, it almost felt like a waste to him. Giving bread to such people. They were going to die soon enough, why prolong their suffering? It made no sense to him. And yet, staring at Kalian, who was usually indifferent on all matters, Keys felt his hand move on his own as he grabbed a piece of bread and handed it to the nearest child. His action took Kalian by surprise, but soon enough, he smiled and mumbled, I guess his training with Julian hasn't been for nothing. More, please. My sister is sick. At first, Kalian was able to keep up with the number of children. There were only a few dozen, and he brought enough bread to feed a little over 100. He thought that'd be enough, but, please, more, I am hungry. Slowly but surely more and more children started to show up. Staring at the scene, Kalian picked up the pace and handed the bread faster to the children, but by the time he got to a little girl with disheveled hair, he found his hand stopping. He had run out of bread. Kalian raised his head to look at the girl, who stared at the bucket with an empty look. She showed no sign of sadness or anger. She just stared blankly at the empty bucket and turned around. This had probably not been the first time she had been disappointed. That little girl, she was probably used to this. Kalian bit his lip. She reminded him of his past self. He too used to be like that, but unlike her, he did have someone to go back to. He could tell from the hollowness on her face that she didn't have anyone to go back to. If she did, she'd have cry because she couldn't give them a loaf of bread to help them. Kalian knew because he had been put in a similar situation in the past. His tears had come not from the fact that he couldn't eat, but because he couldn't help his mom. Wait, Kalian pressed his hand over the girl's shoulder and stopped her. She stopped and looked back at him. Silently clenching his teeth, Kalian took out a few coins and tried to hand them to her. Their worth wasn't much, but enough to help her buy some bread. Kalian knew wealth was dangerous in this place, and so he only gave her enough for 2 loaves of bread. Take this. Quote. Blankly staring at the coins, the young girl reached for them when all of a sudden a voice echoed from above. Oi! Kalian's body froze for a second as he flicked his head to look up. There, with his body leaning outside of the window, was an old-looking figure Kalian was all too familiar with. Quote. You understand we're not supposed to do this, right? Julian's cold and indifferent voice echoed from above. Kalian stared at him and opened his mouth, but the words he wanted to say stopped right as he was about to say them. He merely shook his head and placed the coins in the girl's hands. Go, get yourself some food. Taking the coins, the girl turned around and left. Seeing her retreating back, Kalian looked back to see Julian staring at him with the same expression as before. Kalian's heart sank when he saw him shake his head. Quote. And here they say I'm the jinx. Waving his hand, a large box appeared out of thin air. Kalian's eyes widened at the sight, but he quickly recovered and moved forward, grabbing the falling box. Upon opening the box, his eyes widened even further. Quote. How could? Food. He saw a lot of food in the box. There was far more food than what he previously had, and it all looked good. Kalian looked at the box in shock. How did Julian have this on him? Where did he get it? Could it be that he stole them? It's mine. Quote. Raising his head, Kalian looked at Julian. That is my food. I didn't steal it. No, just look at your expression. You were clearly thinking that I stole the food. I didn't. Kalian could only force out a smile. He had been read like a book. Anyways, you owe me a favor. Be more discreet when you hand stuff out. It's only a crime if you get cow. Julian's words caught in his throat as his expression suddenly changed. Noticing the change, Kalian turned around and saw that the children that used to surround him, begging him for food, had disappeared. What the? Kalian's pupils visibly constricted, while Keys frowned and took a defensive stance. A sudden silence descended on the area as the two scanned their surroundings, trying to detect any sign of movement. But the longer they looked, the less they found. It was unnervingly quiet. Too quiet. Let's go back. Quote. Yes. Kalian nodded slightly, about to step back when he froze. His ears twitched, and both he and Keys turned toward the small houses ahead. Their eyes narrowed in unison. Without exchanging a word, they both nodded, and Keys took a step forward. But then his gaze flickered toward his own shadow, his expression changing. He stomped his foot, then dashed back. Swoosh! A figure materialized where he had just stood. Bang! The ground beneath him caved in, and an invisible pressure descended over the surroundings. Appearing before them was a man with short brown hair, piercing blue eyes, handsome features, and a red robe. He looked human enough, but crack! Each of the man's movements was stiff, accompanied by unsettling cracking sounds. He turned to look around, his eyes devoid of life. Crack! Calian felt a lump form in his throat, unsure of what he was seeing. The only thing he was sure about was the strength of the man. It was at a level he couldn't ignore. Fortunately, he didn't seem to see them. At least, not yet. The figure leaned forward, raising both hands awkwardly, while his legs twisted unnaturally. The sight was so grotesque, it felt as though he were staring at a puppet. But the man was clearly alive. Drip. Why else would he be crying? Calian hesitated, unsure what to do. Just as he was about to make a move, Keys stopped him, placing a hand firmly on his shoulder. Before Calian could react, a hand covered his mouth from behind. His heart nearly leapt out of his chest, but he quickly calmed when he saw Julian's aged face. Wait, when had he gotten there? Stay quiet, I've cast an illusion around us. Overhearing Julian's whisper, Calian nodded, understanding. Julian removed his hand, keeping his eyes fixed on the puppet as he frowned. Pressing a hand against Keys's shoulder, the gestured toward the window. We need to fall back. Keys gave a slight nod, taking a step back, but then crack. The air was filled with the sickening sound of cracks, freezing them all in place. Julian's expression shifted, his gaze moving to the rooftops where several figures were now visible, moving in jerky, robotic motions. They climbed onto the walls and moved around with their heads tilting from one side to the other. In an instant, they were surrounded on all sides, and Julian's expression changed as he stopped whatever he was doing. As the surroundings grew silent, Julian looked at Calian and raised his hand. I'll beat you. Chapter 487. Grand Wedding 4 inches. What do you think about the current situation? Are you not worried at all? You know, while everything looks calm right now, I'm already starting to get a bad feeling. You're right to think that way. After all, pausing, Leon mumbled, that Jinx is here. Evelyn, who heard his words, smiled bitterly. I've been hearing this a lot, but do you really think he's a Jinx? Yes. There was no hesitation in Leon's words. The speed and certainty in his tone were enough for Evelyn's smile to grow more bitter. Quote. You really do hate him. At times. Leon shrugged, mopping the floor. He may or may not be a Jinx, but it's undeniable that he's been at the center of all troubles lately. Whatever the case is, we've only just arrived, but looking at the rules placed on us, the situation outside is quite complicated. You're not wrong. Entering the hallway, Amael glanced at Leon and the others, who stopped whatever they were doing. Since everyone knew what they looked like with their new disguise, nobody had trouble identifying Amael. I've just done a little investigating while you guys were cleaning. I more or less know what is going on at the moment. Hearing Amel's words, Aoife raised her brow. You do? If the servants didn't lie to me, then yes. Don't tell me you bribed them. Whatever gets the job done. Amael shrugged with a smile. It didn't even cost him that much. Just a few mana crystals. Since the currency in this place was different, Amael had to pay using mana crystals, a euro, condensed forms of pure energy created from mana. These crystals were not only a medium of exchange but also a valuable resource for enhancing one's strength and abilities. They were usually the currency used in out-of-empire trades. Anyways, the situation is complicated. With a grim look, Amael started to recount his findings. From what I've gathered, the Kasha are facing a similar issue with monsters. Normally, handling them wouldn't be a challenge for them, but one of the strongest factions within the Eastern Kasha has gone completely silent, vanishing from everyone's sight. One of the biggest forces. Aoife pondered for a few seconds before concluding, are you talking about the House of Astrid? Yup. Amael nodded, his face growing more troubled. It started just a month ago, but all of a sudden they cut off all contact with the outside world and the people in the Kasha. It's as if they've sealed themselves from the world, cutting all ties with the world. Why? I don't know. Nobody knows. Amael rubbed his forehead. Things would have been easier if he knew, but regardless of who he tried to bribe, nobody knew the answer. Be it the servants or anyone else within the household. Nobody knew. Without the support of the House of Astrid, everything here has begun to deteriorate, including the trade. In the past, all goods flowed through the House of Astrid before being distributed to the four empires. As the overlords of the region, they control everything that passes through. Ah, and wow that they've sealed themselves, they can't trade. Evelyn smacked her fist against her palm as she had a sudden understanding. However, she soon frowned. Wait, if the House of Astrid had closed themselves off, can't they just bypass them? If they don't check, I'm sure they can just. That's the problem. Amel's expression turned even more complicated. Quote. You can say they've sealed themselves off from the world, but that's not entirely true. The Astrids are still patrolling the surroundings, and they cut off anyone that tries to move outside of the city walls immediately. Wait, what? Aoife placed her mop to the side and frowned. If they've stopped everything, why are they blocking trades? I'm not entirely sure, but even when the other houses attempt to confront them by capturing some of their lower-ranked guards, they get no answers. The servants claim the guards suddenly go mute. No matter how far they push severing limbs, burning flesh with acid, they refuse to utter a single word. It's almost as if they have suddenly become soulless puppets. Hiss. Everyone drew in a breath of cold air. From what Amel was saying, the situation was even more complicated than expected. The House of Myron has already spread the news to the four empires, but as you all know, they don't really have the time to help with the current situation. Furthermore, considering the relationship between the two sides, they are probably against the four empires providing a lot of help. They don't want to be in too much debt with them. So they'd rather have their own people starve. Quote. Apparently so. Amel replied with a bitter smile. He too couldn't understand why those of the Kasha were so stubborn and hated the four empires so much. It wasn't as if they prohibited them from entering the empires and becoming its citizens. The same was true for the trades. They could easily trade with the empires if they wanted to, but they simply refused. They wanted nothing to do with the empires, and if not for the situation becoming so dire, they probably wouldn't have allowed them to enter the Kasha. They probably needed a small helping hand. Small enough that they didn't need to be in a lot of debt with the empires. Ook. Leaning by the side of the wall, Kira made a face. It's always like this in the end with this bullshit politics. These bastards, egos are even bigger than mine. If they put their pride down, they could have probably solved the situation a lot faster, since the empires could have probably helped a month ago. But it's too late now. They did this to themselves. Quote. Their resentment with us runs deeper than you think. There's nothing you can do about it. Amel shrugged and turned to look at Leon, who was in deep thought. After a while, Leon shook his head and sighed. Since the situation is like this, then it's best if we wait for a bit to better understand how the House of Astrid currently operates. Considering the situation with the monsters, they might even make us fight them, so we might not have that much time. Oh, right. Turning to look at the window, towards the large walls that appeared in the distance, Amel's expression grew solemn. I've heard there's quite a lot of terror-ranked monsters outside. If they do send us out there, I'm not sure we'll ever have time to understand what is happening. I don't know about you all, but I want to go back quickly. Yes, Leon agreed. This place, despite having only spent a few hours here, it already felt incredibly stuffy for him. He already wanted to go back. Just as Leon turned to look at the window, he realized something. Wait, where is Julian? Leon turned his head to look at his right and then left. However, regardless of where he looked, he couldn't find a single trace of Julian. Where did he? Maybe he left, Kira mumbled, pointing towards one of the opened windows of the hallway. He did look pretty annoyed from what I remember. Hell, he didn't even finish cleaning his window. Scratching the back of his neck, Leon moved towards the window Julian was working on and saw that it was only half clean. Thinking back to how they were making fun of him, Leon shook his head. Single quote. I guess what Kira said makes sense. Had Leon been in Julian's position, he too would have left. Looking down the window, Leon looked at the empty streets below and felt a faint breeze brush against his skin. It felt cool, and at the same time heavy. It was hard to describe, but it was anything but pleasant. It's like a mix of the environment within the mirror dimension and the real world. Shaking his head once more, Leon reached for the window handle and began to push it shut. However, just as the glass started to slide into place, he froze mid-motion. Reaching his hand forward, he caught what appeared to be a blood-red leaf. Staring at the leaf, Leon felt his breath pause for a second. For some reason, that leaf felt eerily familiar. But where had he seen it before? Two thump. A loud, rhythmic thumping sound echoed through my mind, pounding relentlessly and shaking me out of my daze. Two thump, they were loud, too loud, two thump. At some point, my eyes opened up and my expression changed drastically. Two thump, the color red dominated my surroundings as crowds gathered from every direction, their gazes fixed on the center of a sprawling open field encircled by towering white buildings. At the center of the field stood several figures clad in vivid red, each gripping large drums that reverberated with every powerful strike of their sticks. Two thump, what is going on? Shocked by the situation, I tried to recall what had happened a few moments prior, and it soon hit me. Just as I leapt down to assist Kalian, a few hundred people suddenly surged out of the houses as if they had been waiting there all along. I attempted to fight back, but before I could do anything, my vision began to fade to black. Single quote. This is bad. Looking around and seeing the people around me clap and jumping around, I felt my lips grow dry. However, instead of panicking, I remained calm. I was good at remaining calm in situations such as these. Taking a deep breath, I closed my eyes and fully relaxed myself. Judging from the situation, I was ambushed and brought to this place. Everything happened so fast that it's also likely that Leon and the others didn't detect a thing. Especially since the people didn't even use any mana when taking us down. At least, I hadn't felt any mana from them. Single quote. Since I'm here, I'm also sure Kalian and Keys are here, but where are they? I looked around in hopes of finding them, but there were far too many people around me to see properly. For now, I should get out of here and look for them. With a plan in mind, I tried to move when I was hit with a sudden realization. Looking down at my legs, I realized I couldn't move at all. Not only that, crack, a strange cracking sound echoed in the air, and before I could process it, my hands moved on their own. Their stiff, jerky movements caught me off guard. And before I knew it, clap, I started to clap on my own. Looking at my arms, and more specifically the string attached to them, my stomach churned. This was bad, really bad. Chapter 488. Grand Wedding 5. Clap. My hands moved on their own. I had lost complete control of them. In the center of the open space, drummers beat their instruments in rhythm, their performance captivating the crowd as confetti filled the air. Women adorned in flowing veils and delicate, long white strings gracefully moved around them. Two thump. It was a beautiful scene. But the scene came to an abrupt halt as the drummers stepped aside, and the dancers froze in place. I too stopped clapping, and two figures in veils stepped in the middle. Though their appearance was hidden beneath their veils, I could tell they were the stars of the shows. They were groom and bride. Yes, this was without a doubt a grand wedding. Even though I couldn't move my hands, I found I could still move most other parts of my body. My expression changed at the sight that greeted me. A wedding. Could this be the reason why they've suddenly gone completely silent? No, there was no way. I observed the scene intently, noticing how everyone moved with such precise rhythm and synchrony that it felt almost unnatural. From their fixed smiles to the fluidity of their movements, something about it was disturbingly flawless. None of it felt real. Turning my head, I looked at my arms and drew a cold breath. I already had an idea beforehand, but it was clear to me now. Everyone present, they were being controlled by the same strings that were controlling my arms. It was just that, unlike them, I wasn't being controlled fully. Why was that? Could it be that it needs time? If so, I hastily looked around to see if Kalian and Keys were present. The place was large, with people appearing on all sides, staring at the groom and bride in the middle of the opening of the courtyard. Everyone was dressed in red, and everyone wore the same unnerving and creepy smile. Finding them wasn't exactly easy, but there, I found them after a few seconds of looking. Kalian stood amidst a row of people positioned toward the southern side of the enormous courtyard, while Keys was stationed on the eastern side, each occupying their respective places. As if they had the same idea as me, they also looked around before inevitably noticing me. Their expression changed subtly. Good, it looks like they aren't fully controlled. Partially just like me. I sighed in relief and slightly shifted my foot forward. Flick. That proved to be a terrible idea. Almost instantly after I made a move, the heads of the people around me snapped in my direction. Their unnerving stares rooted me in place, leaving me holding my breath as an eerie silence settled over the scene. Flick. In the distance, I noticed the same thing happening for Keys and Kalian and my legs trembled faintly. This is messed up. I didn't have much time to dwell on the situation. Seeing things turn like this, I clenched my teeth and checked my skill window. My expression fell when I saw that, eyes of the seer, was still gray. Damn it. With no other choice, I visualized a green orb. Swoosh. In seconds, I forced my way out of the spot. Flick, flick, heads continued to turn sharply in my direction, their stares tightening my chest with a suffocating sense of dread. An invisible pressure seemed to weigh down on me, prompting me to take deep and uneven breaths. Forcing myself to focus, I ignored the atmosphere and fixed my gaze on the strings attached to my arms. Taking another deep breath, I visualized the red orb with all my concentration and pulled down. Snap. The treads snapped, and I was finally free from the restraints. That also marked the start of the puppet's movements. Creak creak, creak. A creaking sound filled the air as the people stiffly started to move, their hands and feet pulling up in weird doll-like movements. There were too many for me to count and I hastily looked in the other's direction. They appeared to be in a similar situation. Looking at the two sides, they both looked at me and with a look of understanding, Keys suddenly took a step forward and his eyes turned murky white. Cease your movement at once. In the time it took for one to blink, the surroundings faded, turning completely white. All the people stopped moving and Keys's face turned pale. Holding onto his mouth, he looked in my direction. Let's go. I nodded and tensed my calves, appearing right where he was in a second. Are you okay? Quote. Ook. Keys held his mouth and dashed out of the white world that was his domain. They're weaker than the one we faced before. Be careful. It's not over. I know. How could I not know? Had it been the same people from before, we wouldn't have been able to get this far. They were all more compact, and they completely suppressed us with their numbers. The people here were much weaker than them. Even so, their collective pressure was no joke. We didn't have much time. We had to get out of this place as fast as possible. Where should we go? Catching up from behind, Kalian looked around and eventually fixed his gaze on one side of the building. Quote. There, we were currently inside an enormous courtyard, surrounded by buildings from all sides with no way out. The only plausible option seemed to be entering one of the buildings, but none of us knew the layout of the place. How exactly could we get out from there? Brute our way out. I quickly shook my head as soon as the thought entered my mind. Judging from the material of the building, that appeared unlikely. Then, I don't think we have enough time to think about what we should be doing. Looking back, Kalian's face tightened. Let's hurry up in and find our way out from there. Okay. Though I didn't look back, seeing Keys's face turn pale, I could sense that his domain was on the verge of collapsing. Moving down a little, I placed his hand over my shoulder and helped him. Forward. Let's go. Quote. KH. Clank. Arriving at the nearest door, Kalian smashed it open with his foot as he scanned the dimly lit hall. His expression froze as his gaze fell upon the long wooden stairs leading to the second floor. The air grew heavy, especially at the sight that greeted us above. At the top of the stairs, countless heads turned toward us, their eyes eerily hollow, expressionless, and still like lifeless mannequins. Creak creak. The unsettling silence was broken only by the creaking of the wooden floorboards beneath our feet, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Something in the air felt wrong in a way that sent a chill crawling up my spine. This way. Kalian pointed towards a large wooden door and rushed ahead. His eyes grew a deep shade of red as his entire body popped and cracked. Boom. The door split apart under his force, and he hastily looked around. Damn it. His expression fell quickly upon seeing that the room was a dead end. A heavy silence fell over us shortly after. Thump. Quote. Quote. One that was shattered by a loud thumping sound. Flicking our heads, our eyes fell on the nearby windows where several people appeared, their eyes widening to the point where I felt my hand shiver. What now? I looked around, my eyes scanning my surroundings. There were only two doors. The one that led to the outside, and the one that led to this room. Besides the stairs, there was no other way out. Stairs. As my mind raced, Keys managed to force out a word. Looking down at him, Keys flatly replied. We can't be surrounded if we go up. It's too narrow. Hoo. If we fight them there, we have a higher chance of making it out. Oh, Keys was right. The stairs couldn't hold that many people. While the dolls were strong individually, they weren't actually stronger than either of us. The only reason we had so much trouble with them was because of the sheer number of them. If we didn't have to fight so many of them, then let's go. Yes. Neither three of us hesitated. Keeping Keys close to me, the three of us rushed toward the stairs. Creak creak as expected, the stairs were filled with people, but bang, ah, they posed no real trouble for Kalian, who managed to push them back with brute force alone. I wasn't idle either. Lifting my hand, I summoned hands from beneath the ground, rising with a violent force and clutching onto several of the surrounding figures. Bang, bang. At the same time, I tried cutting the threads connected to them, but right as I cut them, they sharply reattached to the dolls in a matter of seconds. Damn it, things would have been easier had it worked. KHU. Together with Kalian's sharp strikes and my own efforts, we just barely managed to carve a narrow path through the swarm, forcing our way forward inch by inch. The sounds of feet scraping against the floor, the sudden thud of bodies hitting the ground, and the eerie quiet of the unmoving gaze filled the space around us. We were close to breaking through. Quick, bang, and soon enough, an opening appeared. We didn't waste a single second. The moment the opening appeared, I grabbed both Kalian and Keys while a bright green orb appeared in my mind. A sharp pain invaded my mind, but I ignored it and just focused on my continuously expanding calves. Half a second later, swoosh, the air twisted and my legs felt like they suddenly exploded. Ook, thump. Holding onto my mouth to stifle the ragged breaths, I stumbled down a few steps before finally collapsing to a stop. The pain in my calves hit me like a wave, sudden, searing as if they had just exploded from the effort. Ah, this is bad. I could hardly move. Each time I took a step, one of my muscles would start to squirm. I would have been fine if it was just myself, but two people. I clenched my teeth and silently endured the pain. Looking up, I paused when I saw Kalian and Keys staring in the same direction. Looking back, my heart sank as I caught sight of the swarm. Countless figures are more like puppets, clawing and scrambling over one another in a frenzy as their limbs moved awkwardly. My breath paused, and just as I turned to shout a warning, the words froze in my throat. Catching sight of what they were seeing, I also stopped for a second. Kalian and Keys both looked at me. We have to go there. We have no choice. But Keys and Kalian looked behind and stopped whatever I was about to say. Then, without waiting for a word from me, the two bent over and gripped the edges of the trapdoor, yanking it open. Creak. A faint creak echoed, revealing a dark, narrow stairway of aged wooden planks spiraling down into the darkness below. The faint smell of damp wood and stale air wafted up, filling my nostrils as Kalian and Keys hurried down. Hurry. Ah, yes. Stumbling forward, I rushed down the stairs as Keys and Kalian closed the trapdoor behind me. Bang. Go, quick. We don't know how long we have. Kalian grabbed me by the shoulder and helped me down the stairs. Considering the state I was in, this was a big help. Ha, ha, ha. As we descended the stairs, our hurried breaths reverberated through the narrow space, filling the surrounding air. In the silence, it felt stifling. But the silence didn't last long. With a muffled bang, we knew that the trapdoor above shattered, and the puppets were coming. We hurried down faster. How long left? There, look. With Kalian pointing forward, we all took notice of a small opening that flashed with a dim orange glow. Our eyes lit up and we moved towards the point. But just as we crossed the opening, it all came crashing down. No, 11 inches a dead end. What greeted us was a dead end. Thump, thump. The muffled thuds of footsteps behind us grew steadily louder, each echo carving through the narrow space like the tick of a clock. My heart sank as I looked back. We were screwed. Skr tick, tick. A soft ticking sound pulled my attention, and my head whipped toward the source. In the distance stood an aged figure. His presence was clear despite the dim lighting. His long white beard flowed down his chest, and his hair, tied neatly in a ponytail, nicely framed his face. Holding onto a pocket watch, he looked in our direction. Time's almost up, he mumbled, shifting his attention toward the entrance, which was soon swarmed by puppets. Tick. Staring at the clock, he once again looked at us. Come find me again after the reset. Reset. What was he? My expression froze, a chill creeping over me as Kalian's and Keys' faces similarly changed. Around us, the puppets stopped in unison, their movements stopped as though someone had hit pause on the entire scene. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by our shallow breaths. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a thin, glinting string descending from above. Before I could react, it wrapped around my arms and legs. By the time I realized what it was, I was already moving on my own. The other puppets also started moving, going all the way back up the stairs as I turned my head to look at the old man. Wait, what do? Like I said, find me after the reset. With those words, the old man turned around and faded into the darkness. I tried to reach out to him but I was too exhausted and before I knew it, I was back in the courtyard. Back in the same position as before. Back to the start. 2 thump. The drums started playing. Chapter 489. When the time resets 1 2 thump. The drums echoed. Loudly. Standing in the same row as before, I started to clap. Clap, clap. What is going on? I held my breath while staring at the scene in front of me. I couldn't understand what was happening, and as I tried to move my hands, I realized that the thread connecting to my arms had become stronger than before. Looking down, I also realized that unlike before a thread was now connected to one of my legs. Do the threads increase and become more powerful with time? Looking around and seeing how stiffly some of the people were moving, I felt like this was the case. My heart sank at the realization. Raising my head again, I quickly took notice of Keys and Kalian. They too appeared shocked and confused by the situation. Thinking back, the entire situation was confusing. Why did all the puppets stop at the same time? Why did we all come back here and who was that old man? I also remember him saying something about reset. I thought about the scene in front of me. Was he talking about this? But then, how could he still be moving normally? A lot of things didn't make sense to me. However, I remained calm. The situation was problematic but not impossible. I just needed to figure out the rules of this place. Considering how everything reset, there were rules that the puppets needed to follow. So long as I understood the rules then I'd be able to find a way out of this place. But first things first, Almighty, Pebble, 2 figures appeared right before me. Confused, they looked around. Where is this? It's loud. 2 thump, 2 thump. As the drums echoed in the background, they both jumped in my direction. Okay, good. It looks like they aren't being noticed. At first, I flinched, but I soon sighed in relief when I saw no reaction from the puppets around me upon their appearance. Looking at the 2 of them once, no words needed to be exchanged between us as the 2 immediately dashed away. Almighty headed for Keys while Pebble headed for Kalian. With the 2 of them being made up of energy, none of the puppets reacted. This was good. At the very least, this would ensure that the 3 of us could communicate. What is this? As expected, the moment Pebble and Almighty arrived, they recited Kalian's and Keys's words in my mind. Calm down, it's me. Whispering slightly, Almighty and Keys relayed the message to the 2 as they looked at me directly. Nodding my head to ensure they understood, I started speaking again. If we want to communicate between us then you can directly tell your words to the cat and owl in front of you. They'll relay your words directly to me. There's such a thing. Hearing Pebble's voice, I turned my head to look at Kalian and nodded in his direction. His eyes widened slightly and his expression eased. Alright, it looks like it works. None of the people around me seem to notice that I'm speaking. Yes, there's a chance they only react to our movements but I'm not too sure. Perhaps we didn't need Almighty and Pebble. The 3 of us could just shout at one another from our respective positions but this was a gamble I didn't want to risk. Furthermore, with the drums being so loud, I doubted we could even get our words across. Considering what the old man said, everything here resets at a certain time. What time is it right now? Do any of the 2 of you know? It's 12:09 a.m. Almighty's flat voice entered my mind as he relayed Keys's words. Looking up at the sky and seeing that it had turned dark, I thought it made sense. If that's the case then the reset time is most likely midnight. Give or take, 10 minutes had passed since we found ourselves back in the courtyard. Calculating the time then this was the most likely possibility, but who was that old man? I have no idea. Replying to Kalian, I could only shake my head. I was just as confused as they were. Seeing how everyone present had been controlled by the strings, us included, the old man felt suspicious. Was he the one controlling the people? Or was he also a victim of the strings? Considering his appearance, it's plausible that he's the head of the Astrid family. With his level of strength, there's a possibility he can resist the strings' control. I wasn't too sure, to be honest. If someone as powerful as him could be placed in such a predicament, it only amplified my apprehension about the strength of the mastermind orchestrating it all. Just how powerful were they? What should we do then? The old man seems suspicious, but what other choice do we have besides going to him? Can you call for help using this owl? Hearing Keys's suggestion, I looked at Almighty. I thought about sending him out to warn Leon and the others but before doing that, I wanted to establish a point of communication between the 3 of us. Yes, it looks possible. Or at least, it looked possible. Whether it was truly possible or not I wasn't 100% sure. I'd know after trying, but even if I do, what can they do? They'd be just as helpless as us. At most, they'll be able to get more reinforcements from the academy, if they even have some to spare, but that'll take time. What about the House of Myron? They're probably too busy fighting monsters to care about us. And even if they did have forces to spare, I doubt they'd even care enough to help us. I looked specifically at Kalian. Quote. We did break their rule after all. This was on us. Well, I didn't really blame Kalian. In fact, I was surprised by his actions. I didn't take him for someone who would show such a level of compassion. He felt more like a snake to me. A snake that would do anything for his own sake. This event, it changed my perception of him by a little. I guess even snakes feel some compassion. It made me think, could there be more to Kalian than I knew? Right. It's my fault. It is. Keys didn't mince his words. This was likely due to his lack of emotions, but he was rather blunt with everything he said. He was also not one to speak a lot, unlike Kalian. Feeling Keys's gaze, he looked up at the dark sky. It is worth a try. Even if they are unable to help, it might be good for us to let them know. You're right. Nudging my head at Almighty, who understood my message, I saw it flap its wing and shoot for the sky, blending directly with the darkness above. At the same time, I reminded, tell them not to make any rash movements. Say that we're fine for now. I'll update them on our situation, and it is best if they inform the professors about our situation. I could already tell we were going to get in a lot of trouble when all was said and done, but I was already used to this by now. Not the first time I've gotten into trouble. Staring at the fading owl, I sighed and looked at my skills. In particular, I looked at Eyes of the Seer, which was still grayed out. It had been a while since I had last used the skill, and I could still not use it. Why? Just how long was the cooldown going to be? A month? A few months? Staring at my surroundings, I knew that I needed the skill. To get out of this situation, I needed to have the skill work. Only through the skill would I know if the old man was with us or against us. Not only that, but I also needed to find an appropriate method to avoid being detected by the puppets. This was why the skill was vital for me. A single wrong step and I knew we were done for. I couldn't afford to take such risks. Then, a thought occurred to me and my body trembled. If it's that way then. Clenching my teeth, I shot a glance at Pebble, who seemed to understand my command and began moving toward me. Kalian's expression flickered briefly with surprise, but he quickly masked it, his gaze steady and focused on me. Shortly after, 2 items appeared in my hand as Pebble quickly caught them. Tick, a pocket and a small red vial. Yes, a vial. Within the vial was Oricleus's blood. My blood. Following the events in the gold mine, I collected a few vials containing Oricleus's blood. Thinking back to what happened when the Pope injected Oricleus's blood in me, I had a feeling this might just be what I needed to break the cooldown of the skill. Opening my mouth, Pebble opened the vial and poured the blood into my mouth. A sharp, iron-like taste flooded my mouth, making me wince as it clung to my tonsils. My body began to twitch uncontrollably as a result of the taste. I pushed through the disgust and quickly swallowed the blood. Almost immediately, a warm sensation spread through my chest. It flooded my entire body, rendering me completely immobile. Before I knew it, the world around me started to distort in a long spiral that almost made me lose my balance. But right within the spiral, I could see something. A figure. No, it was 2. They stood face to face with one another, their figures obscured. Who? Hey, the voice sounded quite high, seemingly close to a teenager. Almost like my brother, but different. Still, I could feel that the person speaking held high regard for the other person who I couldn't see. What is it, Torin? I've finally come up with a name for myself. A name? Yes, like an alias. Oh, what is it? Single quote. Cithrus. Yes, I'll call myself that. Sound pretty badass, right? My eyes widened as the other figure slowly turned, locking eyes with me. I froze, rooted to the spot, unable to move under the weight of his gaze. He scanned my surroundings with an unsettling calm, then nodded his head in understanding. Shortly after that, he cast his eyes downward, focusing on the kid with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Cithrus. It's not bad. It all ended there. Finding my breath again, the world returned to normal and the spiral disappeared from my view. With sweat dripping down from the side of my head and my chest moving up and down unevenly, I stared at my skill page and looked directly at Eyes of the Seer. Indeed, my guess wasn't wrong. The blood helped, but what did I just see? Chapter 490. When the time resets too at the same time, House of Myron. As everyone headed back to their rooms after completing their tasks for the day, Aoife looked around. Quote. Has anyone seen Julian? Julian. Evelyn tilted her head, similarly looking around before settling her gaze over to Kira, who scratched the back of her head. Dunno. It's been a bit since he left. Where do you think he went? Maybe he went to investigate the situation. Well, who the fuck cares? He leaves like this all the time. You should be used to this by now. Yeah, you're right. At Kira's words, Aoife stopped and nodded. Right. Nothing was surprising about Julian disappearing. It was a common thing. I'm more surprised by the fact that those two, Kyle and Chameleon, have disappeared. It's Keys and Kalian. Aoife corrected Kira, who scratched the back of her head while saying, shit. Yeah, that. She wasn't very good with names. Wait, they disappeared. It was Aoife's turn to look surprised. Leon looked at her weirdly. Aren't you the group leader? How do you not know? No, that. Aoife's face fell while she started throwing one excuse after another. There's a lot of students and I can't keep an eye on everyone. Especially Kira, since she might do something that might get us all in trouble. If I have to babysit her, then I can't pay attention to everyone, can I? Oi. Kira frowned but didn't rebuke Aoife. Thinking about it, Aoife's words weren't without merits. Kira puffed up her chest. I do cause trouble, but at least I know I do. Leon looked at Kira and shook his head before looking at Aoife. If you're so worried about someone making trouble, then you should have kept an eye on Julian. That's impossible. Why? He's stronger than me. If he really wants to leave my sight, I can't do anything about it. 11. Leon tried to argue back, but when he opened his mouth, he realized that he had no words to argue against her. And he hated that fact. See, even you know that I can't do anything about him. Leon covered his mouth, his eyes darting around the room. Just as he considered reaching out to the professor, a movement caught his attention. His head snapped toward the nearest window, where a faint shadow flickered, and he soon spotted an owl. Taking a closer look, Leon realized he was familiar with the owl. Wasn't this Julian's pet? That's. Coming to an abrupt halt, everyone turned toward Almighty, who stood outside the window. Without a moment's hesitation, Leon stepped forward and pushed the window open, allowing the dry, cold air to rush in, sweeping through the hallway. What are you doing here? Is Julian nearby? No. Almighty shook its head, glancing around the group. With its cold eyes, it started to speak. He's with two other people. Where? At Aoife's question, Almighty turned silently, its eyes glinting in the darkness, and extending its wing, Almighty pointed toward the towering white structure in the far distance. There. The expression of everyone present fell at the same time. Closing her eyes, Aoife rubbed her face while mumbling, Jinx. I tried to deny it, but they weren't wrong. He's a jinx. Staring into the distance, Leon's eyes narrowed. Let me guess. He turned to look at Almighty. He's in trouble, isn't he? Quote. Yes. My mind was a jumbled mess. Recalling the faint vision that had just occurred, my mouth suddenly grew dry. Thump. In the background, the drums continued to echo as I forced myself to keep steady. So in the end, Cithras was someone that I knew. I tried to recall the voice, but my mind was blank. I couldn't recall such a person in the past. From the tone in which he spoke, he seemed to be rather familiar with me. But how come I didn't know? I'm almost certain my memories haven't been manipulated. No, it is more like a large chunk of my memories have been erased. Could it be that I was the one who had done this? Or was there a different reason for this? However, if there was one thing that I was certain about, it was the fact that I saw myself staring at me. I saw myself. He didn't react, but I knew that he saw me. That made me think, what if in the past I saw myself like this? I licked my lips. The thought was wild, but it made perfect sense. Oricleus, Emmett, me. I had seen the future in advance and prepared for it. Of this much I was sure. Now, I finally understood another thing. The future that Emmett saw, was the future that I made. This is so confusing. Everything felt like a jumbled mess in my mind, but I was starting to understand. Everything that I did was interconnected with the past, present and future. This very much felt like something an oracle would pull off. But even so, there were still a lot of things that I didn't understand. And in this particular case, my relationship with Cithras. How close were we in the past? This made me IOUS, but I knew that I didn't have the time to dwell on this matter. There were more pressing matters that I needed to take care of. Taking a deep breath, I fixed my gaze on the skill tab in front of me. In particular, towards a certain skill Eyes of the Seer. It was no longer gray. I could now use the skill. My chest trembled at the sight, but I didn't hastily press on the skill. I still wasn't sure about the duration of the skill. Was it going to last until I died, or was there a fixed time limit? I was still unsure about this, so I needed to plan in advance. If there was a time limit, then I couldn't afford to waste time. I have two options: find an exit, or go to the old man. My heart told me to look for an exit, but recalling the past few experiences, I knew that it was almost impossible for me to find an exit. Whoever created this entire scenario didn't want us to escape. The old man looked like the more promising option of the two. At least, for now. I still have 2 more vials. Even if I do end up wasting the first skill, I have 2 other tries. I'd rather not use them, but it's not like I have much of a choice. I couldn't wait for reinforcements to arrive. By then, who could say I wouldn't become a puppet like the others here? Time was slipping through my fingers, and I had no room for hesitation. Turning my head faintly, I looked at my pocket watch and checked the time. Tick, tick, it was 12:12 a.m. Taking note of the time, I activated the skill. It's active. Watching the skill turn gray, I looked directly at Pebble and opened my mouth. Tell Keys and Kellyanne to move in the opposite direction of before. Tell them that I need them to attract the attention of all the puppets. This was a simulation of sorts. I didn't need to think about Keys and Kellyanne's safety. For that reason, I planned on using them as bait so that I could get into the same room as before. Are you sure, human? Won't they think you're ditching them? Tell them that I have a plan. Okay. Pebble didn't question any further and dashed in Keys and Kellyanne's direction. Upon hearing my words, they both looked at me with frowns. I met their gazes and nodded my head slightly. Trust me, their frowns depended, but they eventually relented and moved forward. Flick, flick, flick. As expected, all the puppet heads snapped toward them in eerie unison. The sight sent a chill racing down my spine, but this time, I wasn't the one under their unsettling gazes. The drums came to a stop and a suffocating silence shrouded the space. Holding my breath, I watched as the people around me started to move, their arms and legs moving in a disjointed manner as the strings attached to them pulled them from the sky above. Like mindless puppets, they rushed in Kellyanne and Keys' direction. The two were still tired from before and so was I, but enough time had passed for us to fight, and so, the moment Kellyanne and Keys dashed in the opposite direction, 2 orbs appeared in my mind and the strings above me snapped as I dashed towards the same direction as before. Swoosh, my legs hurt as I moved, but I ignored the pain and smashed the door of the building open, directing my attention towards the stairs as I closed my eyes and envisioned a dark space. When I opened my eyes again, the entire space had turned dark, with the faint outline of the stairs and floor above appearing in sight. Purple hands appeared from beneath the ground, reaching for the many people present, and rooting them in place. Holding onto my chest, I rushed to the stairs and directly ignored the puppets. As my mana rapidly drained, I felt my body become weak, but I still managed to keep myself steady while following the familiar path from before. Tick, tick, it was 12:15 a.m. There. Eventually, as my mana reached its limits, I forced my way to the trapdoor, flung it open, and rushed down without hesitation. Clank. It was dark and I could hardly see, but I kept rushing down. Tick, tick, it was 12:17 a.m. That was the time when I finally arrived at the familiar room. Entering the place, my steps slowed and my breath stopped. Dang, a certain note played in the air. It felt vaguely familiar, coming straight from a piano, and it seemed to come from all around the room. Looking around, the room was almost entirely empty except for a large wooden box by the end of the room. Outside of that, I didn't notice any instrument. Where's the old man? Searching for the old man, my expression fell when I noticed that he wasn't there. But I soon stopped and smashed my foot down, forcing myself back as I noticed the presence of someone behind me. Yue made it quicker than I expected. Standing right behind me was the same old man from before. Wearing tattered clothes that highlighted his enormous frame, the old man looked at me for a brief second before looking back. What about your 2 friends? Did you ditch them? That, I thought for a moment before lying. I didn't. The old man nodded, his gaze piercing right through me. Are you lying to me? No, I wasn't actually, since this wasn't real. If you say so. The old man shrugged after sparing me a glance. Staring at the old man, I felt an overwhelming pressure emanating from him. It was suffocating, making it hard to breathe, as though his mere presence was squeezing the air from my lungs. For me to feel such pressure. Just who was this man? Thump, thump a euro, the sudden sound of muffled footsteps filled the air from above. Turning my head, I knew that the puppets were coming. That was when I directly turned to look at the old man. You asked me to come back after reset. Do you know of a way to stop this? Stop, you mean the puppets? Yes. I hastily nodded my head, looking in the direction of the stairs as sweat dripped down from the side of my face. They were coming. Tick, tick, it was 12:18 a.m. I do. The old man pointed at the tune playing in the air. Quote. The music keeps the puppets away. Wah, I would've allowed you to stay, but you lied to me. I hastily looked up at the man. Before I could understand what was happening, I felt a powerful force blast me onto the side of the wall as my vision blackened and I found myself back where I came from. Hoo-ah! Taking a deep breath, my chest trembled. Tick, tick, it was 12:12 a.m. I had died.